Good evening and welcome to the Thursday, November 13th, 2014 meeting of the Planning and Zoning Commission of Indian River County. The first item on our agenda is the Pledge of Allegiance. Todd, why don't you lead us in the talk?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. The second item on the agenda this evening is the approval of the minutes from the October 23rd, 2014 meeting. Do I have a motion?
Move to approve.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Motion passes unanimously. Item number 3 is an item on consent. It's the Fry accessory single-family dwelling, which is a request for administrative permit use approval for an accessory single-family dwelling unit. Do I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I think you need to poll the audience to see if anyone would like to comment on this item, and if not, you can vote.
I will poll the audience. Is there anyone in the audience that would like to speak on this item on consent, which is item number 3, the Fry accessory single-family dwelling request for administrative permit use approval? Seeing as how there are none, do I have a motion?
I'll make a motion to approve staff's recommendations.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Motion passes unanimously. Item number 4, it's an item that's not on consent. It's quasi-judicial, so I guess I do have to ask if anybody's had any ex parte communications. Has anyone on this committee has any ex parte communications on Harmony Reserve? And I'm just going to ask also about Family Dollar in Gifford and also Somerset Bay, which I know is just a public discussion, but it also happens to be quasi-judicial. If you've had any ex parte communications that would prevent you from making a careful, conditioned, and fair decision on these, please speak up now. None? Okay. I'm going to turn it over to you guys. Why don't you take us through these?
Thank you, Chairman Zimmerman. John McCoy with the county planning staff. And this is a request by Harmony Reserve for preliminary PD approval. And this particular development received conceptual plan development approval and rezoning approval by the Board of County Commissioners at their meeting of October 7th, 2014. So you all have seen it fairly recently. You all saw it just before it went there and made a recommendation to the board. And this is the subsequent preliminary plat or PD application. The site's located just west of 58th Avenue, south of 37th Street, and north of 33rd Street, and it has been rezoned to PD plan development. The zoning to the west of the subject site is RS3, to the south is RS3, to the east is RS3, and then RS6 on the other side of 58th Avenue, and then RS3 again to the north. This is a land use map, and again it shows it in the overall context of the greater area, with 58th Avenue again being the eastern boundary, 66th Avenue over here, so it spans about half the distance between 58th and 66th Avenue. Aerial shows that the subject site is undeveloped and generally wooded. We have Shadow Brook immediately to the south and to the east. Have the sanctuary, an undeveloped property, generally undeveloped or lightly developed property to the north, and also to the south, some low-density residential. What the applicant's proposing preliminary plat or PD approval for has varied slightly from the conceptual. The conceptual was 301 single-family and 96 multifamily or villa units, the clubhouse, and it is a 55+. 2 of those single-family units have been converted to multifamily units, essentially for their model row, and I'll point that out just a little bit later in my presentation. This is the layout, and the place where those villas were converted, or the single-family lots were converted to villas, is the model row, which is very close to the entry. Just as you come in the entry from 33rd Street, just to the east, or a right turn from the entry. And the layout's other than that, very, very consistent with the conceptual plan that you all saw. Again, 58th Avenue on the east, 33rd on the north, 37th on the north, 33rd on the south, the enclave properties. Aerial close-up shows the layout with respect to the other developed properties in the adjacent area. Traffic circulation will be accessed from 33rd. We'll have a right turn lane constructed with the Phase 1 improvements. There will also be access to 37th Street, and there's a condition required for monitoring for a Phase 4 that may be, or Phase 4 monitoring that may require a left turn lane be constructed in conjunction with Phase 4. As far as the phasing is very similar to the phasing that was presented to the Board of County Commissioners. The blue is the Phase 1, orange is Phase 2, the white Phase 3, and the yellow Phase 4. Within Phase 1, the unit mix has shifted slightly. They're now 26 rather than 24 villas and 68 single-family lots rather than 70. And again, those two that were converted were right here. With Phase 1, there's a possibility of a construction access being constructed at that point that will access 37th Street to facilitate construction access from 37th Street. As far as dedications and improvements, those are all the same as the conceptual plan. The right-of-way dedications for 33rd Street, 58th Avenue, the Murphy Act release along 37th Street, and a portion along 58th Avenue, the 5-foot wide sidewalk along 58th, the 8-foot wide sidewalk along 33rd Street, and the sidewalks on both sides of the internal streets. The applicants provided for additional drainage capacity for improvements to 58th Avenue and 33rd Street. They are looking at completing the clubhouse improvements probably prior to Phase 2, but the condition is that it be completed prior to a certificate of completion for Phase 2. And then when the replat, the plat will be structured so it doesn't alter the rights for the remaining, essentially those enclave lots that were in the Albrecht Acres that will survive Albrecht Acres. As far as environmental items, it does exceed the native upland set-aside. Wetlands, it does impact essentially 16 acres, a little over 16 acres of wetlands. There will be on-site mitigation for 2.86 acres, and then the remainder will occur off-site as far as off-site mitigation, and the applicants presently working through that with their permitting. And then also through the permitting, they'll address gopher tortoises, essentially listed species, gopher tortoises, wood stork habitat, and those letters will be provided prior to a land development permit, clearance letters. As far as a buffering plan, the general concept with the buffering is try to leave as much native vegetation in place as possible and supplement. In some cases, that'll be more possible than others. The buffers are at the narrowest, which is the minimum required, which is 25 feet at a couple places along 33rd Street, a couple places along 37th Avenue, and then a couple of places adjacent to the enclave parcels. But by and large, those have been widened where they can be. And for the majority of the project, they're in addition to 50 or over 50 feet, and that includes the entire west perimeter, the east perimeter, and other areas adjacent to the enclaves to provide buffering. And again, the concept is that these transects through the buffers, that the nuisance exotics would be removed, and that would be supplemented with native vegetation in order to meet that type B buffer standard. One of the nice things about PDs is there's essentially an anti-monotony criterion or criteria in the code as far as development, and that can be achieved a number of ways, both through architectural components and through design components. And I put several slides in as far as the architecturals, and just to get those on the record, and I'm just going to run through those real quickly. And these are the various elevations that are proposed at this time. And that's not to say that the applicant can't come up with additional elevations that would be used within the overall project. And these are, when you see the width, those are keyed to the various lots. This is actually a villa unit, two villa units, one on the top, one on the bottom. So you can see even between the various villas that there's some diversity in architecture between the two halves and the lower one. And then, again, two villa units. And with that, staff does recommend that the Planning and Zoning Commission grant a preliminary PD approval to the Harmony Reserve with the conditions as listed in the staff report. Thank you.
Thank you for your presentation. Any questions of staff? Is there anybody here? Is the applicant here? Would you like to speak? No, nothing. Do I have a motion?
Motion to approve?
That was Mr. Bragnano.
Second.
Mr. Day. All in favor, say aye.
Mr. Chairman, does anybody in the audience want to speak? I know you asked the applicant. I don't know if anybody is here to speak on the matter. I don't know if you inquired or not.
I didn't. Thank you for reminding me. Anyone from the audience like to speak on this matter? Okay. Seeing as how we've corrected that oversight. All in favor, say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Item number, letter B of item number 4 is the Family Dollar in Gifford. It's a request for a preliminary PD plat approval for the Family Dollar Gifford mixed use. Turn it over to you guys.
Thank you, Chairman. Zimmerman. John McCoy with the County Planning staff once again. And this is a preliminary PD for the Family Dollar mixed use in Gifford. And you all saw this one earlier this year. This actually went to the board a little bit earlier. It went to the board June 10th of 2014. And the board granted conceptual plan approval and granted a rezoning to PD MXD, which is Plan Development Mixed Use District. And this is the commercial component of that mixed use district that's coming before you all tonight. And this is actually the first plan development, mixed use development that was approved in the county, and it's moving forward. It's located at the southeast corner of 43rd Avenue and 45th Street, as shown on the slide. This is an aerial, so you can see this is an infill project. To the north of the subject site is a multifamily development. To the east and south of the subject site's multifamily development. West across 43rd Avenue is a place of worship, and then a single family development sort of north and west of the subject site. And the proposal, it's a relatively small site. It's 3 acres in size, so the mixed use is relatively small in nature. It's a 8,320 square foot retail, and then up to 33 units of residential in phase 2. And I'll talk a little bit about that. This is an overall for the preliminary. The retail component is to the west side of the site. The multifamily is to the east side. The multifamily is still conceptual in nature, with the retail being further along. This is the site plan for the retail for the Family Dollar. And at this point, its engineering is fairly firm, with the improvements ending right at this line. And the same for the landscape. This entire area will be landscaped with construction of the Family Dollar. So what you see for the first phase will include that. And again, up to this line on circulation, dedications, and improvements, there's a corner clip required at the intersection. There's a sidewalk required along 45th Street. There's a left turn lane required at the driveway on 45th Street. There's a transit stop that's being provided. All these are tied essentially to the phase 1 improvements. Again, phase 2 being on the east side of the site and being the multifamily, and that red line basically dividing the two areas. As far as traffic circulation, the driveway to 43rd Avenue will be a 2-way full movement driveway. Again, a 2-way full movement driveway to 45th Street with a left turn lane. And where that red line is about where that driveway stub will end. And then once phase 2 is developed, that driveway will continue. And this may be a different design, excuse me. It is still conceptual in nature. So when this comes forward to you all, don't be surprised, but the driveway will continue from here. And then there'll be the layout for the multifamily with a possible driveway to the east. As far as the preliminary plat, this essentially controls the division of land. So they'll end up at the end of this process with 2 different lots. The lot that the Family Dollar will sit on, the lot that the multifamily will sit on. And essentially this dashed line in here is a stormwater easement where the pond and they'll have reciprocal rights back and forth between the two pieces of property that allow for access, utilities, the stormwater rights, and things along those lines. As far as dedications improvements, I touched on that slide. It is the corner clip at 45th Street, the transit stop, the sidewalk, the left turn lane at the 45th Street entrance. There is a tree mitigation fee required in lieu of preservation, and there's a common architectural theme. So when the multifamily comes in, we'll be looking for some commonalities in the architecture, and I'll talk a little bit about that when I get to the architecture for the proposed building. The buffering plan, and really the two things I want to point out here is there's a thoroughfare plan buffer along both roadways, 45th Street and 43rd Avenue, and then adjacent to the multifamily there's a type B buffer with a masonry wall that provides the opaque feature for these multifamily units to the south, essentially where the commercial development occurs, not where the multifamily development is going to occur. Where we have two different like uses, the buffering is not required. With the architecturals, and please note that there will be foundation plantings on all sides of this building, so this is just to illustrate the architecture itself. And the commonalities we'll be looking for is some form of sloped roof, color and materials as far as architecture go in the common architectural theme for the mixed-use PD. With that, staff does recommend that the Planning and Zoning Commission grant preliminary PD approval with the conditions listed in the staff report. Thank you.
Thank you for your presentation. Any questions of staff?
Yeah, applicant hasn't supplied any renderings on the residential component?
Correct. It is still very conceptual at this point, and they have not provided any. And we would look at those when they come in for preliminary PD approval for that component and get to that level of detail at that point in time. But they have a benchmark with the commercial as to what direction to head.
Okay. All right.
In your recommendations, recommendation 3E, install the proposed transit stop not including the bus shelter. Why not the bus shelter now?
We go back to the slide that shows the transit stop. The transit stop is located just to the east of the driveway, and essentially through the conceptual plan process, the transit stop was required. We talked about whether a bus stop or shelter itself was needed, and the MPO indicated that based on the scale of the development, that one would not be required at this time, and they may look at once it got installed, the usage, and then essentially providing for a shelter itself at a later date.
So at this point in time, there may never be a shelter there.
There may not, but it's likely that there probably will.
Is a bus shelter ever a requirement of the developer as a condition of their approval?
The shelter is not, the stop is, and again, that was negotiated as we went through the conceptual approval stage of the development as to the need and the scope of the development requirements. So,
well, what is a bus stop without a shelter?
Yeah.
What is the improvement that is a bus stop?
The improvement is essentially the landing itself and providing for the signage, the landing, and setting up so you can essentially bolt a shelter right onto the...
It's a concrete pad?
Yes, the concrete pad with the...
Have we ever made? Has the county, to your knowledge, ever made a developer actually provide for the shelter and build the shelter?
We have a couple of approvals pending where developers are going to be required prospectively. I can think of one development in the city on Indian River Boulevard that built a shelter in conjunction with a development, an office building, a large office building.
And Mr. Chairman, just for the record, Stan Boland, Community Development Director, the Reserve at Vero, the larger mixed-use project beside Olive Garden, they're doing a stop and a shelter as well. Again, some of it has to do with the scale of the project itself and how much how much traffic I think the MPO believes may be using the shelter.
So it's strictly related to demand?
It's related to two things. One is demand, and the other is negotiation. And I think in a larger scale mixed use, there's no question that you're going to get the traffic there, and it all makes sense. We're not going to have a shelter at every stop, though.
Understood.
Any other questions of staff before I ask the public or the applicant if they want to speak this evening? Seeing as there are none, does anyone from the audience want to speak on this issue? Does the applicant here, do they want to speak on this issue? No?
Yep, we've got someone.
Oh, yes, ma'am. This is quasi-judicial, so please, when you come to the podium, please state your name. Do we need to swear? Does she need to be sworn in, Mr.
Yes.
Attorney? She does need to be sworn in. Okay, we need to swear you in, and please state your name and address for the record.
Sure. For the record, Helene Castletine, Economic Development Director with the Indian River County Chamber of Commerce, 1216 21st Street, Vero Beach.
And before we swear in, if there's anybody else in the audience that even thinks they may want to speak, let's all do this at the same time. And you can stand up to...
Any other issues besides this?
No, just on this issue. Just on this issue. Okay, so Helen, looks like you're the only one who's going to speak this evening. Okay, so Rita, can you...
Raise my hand.
Do you swear or affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes, I do.
Thank you.
Thank you, Rita.
Thank you.
I just wanted to comment, not only am I the Economic Development Director, but I also serve as the Enterprise Zone Coordinator, and this particular project happens to be located within our Enterprise Zone, and we are thrilled to see new commercial development within the Enterprise Zone, not just for, the walkability and the ease of access and that sort of thing, but it's also a job creator for the Gifford community. So we're very excited for this project. And we have talked with the owner as to the benefits that may be available to them once this has come to fruition.
Very nice. Thank you for your testimony. Any other questions? Do I have a motion?
Motion to approve?
Mr. Bragnano?
Second.
Dr. Day? All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Item number 5 on our agenda this evening is a public discussion. It is the Somerset Bay Bermuda Club appeal. It's an appeal of a decision by the Community Development Director to deny an administrative approval to convert the project's construction driveway to the Jungle Trail to allow daily use by large vehicles, including utility, sanitation, landscape vehicles, and other oversized vehicles. So I'm going to turn it over to staff. Why don't you take us through this?
Why don't we go ahead and swear everybody in? And I've just got a couple of
Great
thoughts to go over before we start with the presentation.
Thank you.
Do you,
Anyone who thinks they're going to maybe even possibly speak on this, please stand up and be sworn in now.
do you swear or affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Thank you.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, sir.
This is a review of a decision made by the department head. This case, the department head is the Community Development Director. For anything to change tonight, if there are going to be changes, there will have to be a vote of 5 affirmative votes in order for it to become action. So any decision tonight would have to be unanimous. The other thing that I wanted to point out is that this is an appeal de novo. Appeal de novo is that you don't have to consider the past record. What you hear presented before you tonight should form the basis of your testimony, or should form the basis of your decision. So that's.
Can I ask a question? And our
I'm
decision,
sorry, it's 4 affirmative votes. So it'd have to be a 4-to-1 vote tonight.
4-to-1 vote at
Sorry,
a
Mr.
minimum,
President.
and it is whether or not to, just so we understand the parameters, whether or not to approve their appeal, or does de novo means to change that a little bit?
No, 2 separate things. Any action amending or reversing wholly or partly the Community Development Director's decision shall require 4 affirmative votes of the Planning and Zoning Commission.
Which would in effect be approving the applicant's...
Or putting conditions on it.
I understand.
Or things like that. As far as de novo, it means new. That whatever you hear tonight is what you should base your decision on, not anything in the past or not previous decisions or opinions made.
Thank you. Okay, we're ready.
All right. Thank you. John McCoy with the planning staff. And before I get started with my presentation, there are a couple of items, sort of housekeeping, I want to go through. First of all, it's a correction which I handed out to you all on page 1 of the staff report had my directions reversed. Should have read on the south side. And then secondly, clarification, there are a couple maps, and the map wasn't clear as to the entry, whether it should have had an arrow or labeling, but the label's been adjusted so you can see it both on the map and the location map. And then lastly, as part of the appeals process, we do notify adjacent property owners. We did receive an email from one of those property owners, and the attorneys indicated that I should read that into the record. So I have given a copy to the clerk and to the attorney and to the appellant, so they have a copy of it as well, and I'll read that into the record.
Thank you.
And this is an email from Thomas Collins, and he indicates, it's to Stan, it says, "The Michael family and I share Earring Point Drive, a dirt road that provides access to our single-family homes, which are located west of Jungle Trail. Earring Point Drive intersects Jungle Trail directly across the trail from Somerset Bay construction entrance. While we understood the need to use Jungle Trail access during construction period, it was never intended for commercial use after construction stopped. The original site plan called for this access to be closed after construction was completed. Jungle Trail has always been one of the crown jewels of Indian River County. It needs to stay that way. We oppose allowing this Jungle Trail access to remain open. And would you please see that the members of the Planning and Zoning Commission receive a copy of this email? Thank you, Mr. Collins." So I just wanted to get that onto the record before I started my presentation. And with that, I'll go ahead and start my presentation. This is an appeal of the Community Development Director's decision to deny a request to allow large service vehicles everyday use of the project's construction driveway on Jungle Trail. And this came about as a result of the Bermuda Bay, Somerset Bay, going through a site plan application, essentially administrative approval, which is our site plan application of lowest threshold. That was the form of which the denial took. It was a denial of that administrative approval application. Denial of site plan approvals, if it's a staff level, go before the Planning and Zoning Commission, and that's why it's here before you all tonight. It's the normal process, normal matter, of course. If it were denied by the Planning and Zoning Commission, say it were a site plan that would come before you all, that would then in turn be appealed to the Board of County Commissioners. And if this decision is appealed, it would then be appealed to the Board of County Commissioners. So from a process standpoint, that's sort of the chain that it would follow. Goes the Planning and Zoning Commission first, Board of County Commissioners next.
Can I ask a question just so I understand it? Because I'm a little... They're asking for a modification of their existing site plan? Is that why it's before us this evening?
They were asking to change the operation of that driveway, and that took the form of a site plan of modification request.
Okay. Thank you.
The property is actually located on the North Barrier Island. It's zoned RM6, and eastern boundary is State Road A1A, and the western boundary is Jungle Trail, the Indian River. And Sea Oaks is to the south. The Seasons Plan development is to the north, as is some of the Disney resort to the north of the subject property. The red line you see actually traces the access road through the property, and that will also show up on the aerials that I show next. This is aerial that shows the physical features. Again, much of the Disney property is undeveloped. You can see the Seasons. This is the Somerset Bay portion of Bermuda Club, and it's a mix of single-family homes. These single-family homes are part of Bermuda Club as well as these single families. These are part of Coral Stone, which is a separate development. And Sea Oaks to the south. The water treatment plant is now no longer a treatment plant, but it is a storage and repump facility, as I understand it. And there's a road that does access this facility from Jungle Trail. The access that we're talking about is right at this point. It essentially comes off that cul-de-sac. The cul-de-sac is paved, but the access is not. And there's also, the project was approved with the main entrance being on State Road A1A, there being a emergency access to the water plant road, and then construction entrance to Jungle Trail at this point was part of the site plan. This is a little larger scale aerial, overall aerial, and towards the north end, what you see labeled as 93rd Street is County Road 510, and it intersects A1A, and then as you go to the west, it goes over the bridge and then eventually intersects US 1. The Jungle Trail intersection is right at this point, so this would be the most impacted segment of Jungle Trail as you came down. This would be the location of the cul-de-sac and the access point. The Earring Point Drive is right here, and there are two homes that access off Earring Point Drive, and that was the subject of the email that I read to you all, was this Earring Point Drive, so I wanted to put that in perspective. Seasons was constructed, or was approved actually, in 1999, and it was approved for 92 single-family homes and 84 multifamily units. Not all 84 multifamily units have been built, but most of them have been built. It was approved with primary permanent access to State Road A1A, with emergency access where I showed you to that pre-existing water plant road to the south, and then construction driveway to Jungle Trail as was depicted on the aerial. This slide, and I wanted to put this slide in just to put in the overall context of Jungle Trail, and this shows you essentially the path of the whole trail. I'm going to kind of start at the north and work my way south. At the northern end, the trail goes through the Pelican Island National Wildlife Refuge, goes by Windsor, comes south, goes through the town of Orchid, comes out, hits County Road 510, and that's really what we call the north half of the trail. For what we call the south half of the trail, it starts just south of County Road 510, goes through a lot of the unincorporated area of the county, and then goes into the town of Indian River Shores, goes south, and then loops out back to State Road A1A at the southern terminus. So just want to put that in context of the overall trail and the area that when we're talking about the trail, that is the scope from north to south, what we're talking about. The project's primary access from State Road A1A and restricted access to Jungle Trail is not unique. That's the typical pattern for projects that have access to more than one or two of paved road. Jungle Trail access point is unpaved and is gated, essentially construction gate. And Jungle Trail is not built to modern standards. It's built to standards of another era. It's not paved, and A1A access does meet those modern standards as far as being a paved modern road, modern access, more modern geometry, things like that. Jungle Trail is designated as a scenic and historic road. And in addition to being designated as a scenic and historic road locally, it's also designated as a state, or recognized as a state greenway, and it's designated on the National Register, Federal National Register of Historic Places. So it's got several designations by different entities. And really, this is the crux of the issue, is the applicants appealing the denial based on the assertion there's no alternate roadway access for certain oversized vehicles, and looking for a way to accommodate those oversized vehicles and that type of operation. And staff believes that the State Road A1A access is appropriate for everyday use for all types of vehicles. As far as the code, what the code requires, the code does have, essentially lays out appeal criteria in 3 questions. And the whole idea is that therefore to be an objective format for review of appeals of decisions. And I want to go through those questions and explain to you how the staff analyzed the appeal in addition to having analyzed the application. First question is, did the reviewing official fail to follow the appropriate review procedures? If so, what was the procedural error that was made? And in this case, the applicant submitted an application. It was submitted correctly. The applicant did everything that they should have done from the standpoint of submitting the application. It was taken in by the department. It was routed to all the reviewing departments. Those departments responded. Many of them responded negatively, including traffic engineering and engineering, which recommended denial of the application. That application was subsequently denied by the community development director. A written decision was provided that explained the reasons for the denial. And in addition, the appellant hasn't raised any procedural applications, so we would say that and ask the Planning and Zoning Commission to find that the reviewing official did not fail to meet criterion 1. The second question is, did the reviewing official fail to properly interpret or apply the applicable zoning criteria or zoning district regulations? If so, what was the error in the interpretation or application of the zoning district regulations? And this is where the applicant or the appellant and staff differ. The applicants contended that the denial creates a safety hazard due to lack of access for large vehicles. And the staff's response is that the Jungle Trail Management Plan restricts access so that there's a restriction to preserve the scenic and historic trail, especially for projects like Somerset Bay that are built after the Jungle Trail Management Plan and built with the primary access to a modern paved roadway like State Road A1A. The development was approved essentially 10 years after the Jungle Trail Management Plan was adopted. Jungle Trail Management Plan was adopted in '89. Development was approved in '99. It was approved consistent with the Jungle Trail Management Plan, with the primary access being State Road A1A. To date, staff has allowed only emergency access, interim and temporary access, construction access to Jungle Trail Management, some maintenance access. Everyday use of the trail by the development projects would adversely impact the integrity and the maintenance of the trail, as well as the character of the trail. State Road A1A can be accessed, maintained, or improved, and I'd like to talk just briefly about that. Some of the improvements that could be made at the entry would include geometric changes, additional design changes, and then also operational changes in the way that the main entrance is used, especially by large vehicles, and then also some other maintenance aspects, which would be trimming of trees to allow some of the larger vehicles to get through. The third criterion, excuse me, let me go back just a second. So we would ask the Planning and Zoning Commission to find that the reviewing official did not fail with respect to criterion 2. And with that, I will get to criterion 3, which is, did the reviewing official fail to properly evaluate the application or request with respect to the comprehensive plan, land development regulations of Indian River County? If so, what was the error that was made in evaluating the request with respect to the comprehensive plan policy or land development? And the reviewing official did evaluate with respect to the comprehensive plan, the land development regulations, which refer to the Jungle Trail Management Plan, required continued preservation and avoidance of adverse impacts to Jungle Trail on a historic resource such as Jungle Trail. Access to the trail is specifically restricted, and that turns up in the land development regulations and the comprehensive plan. And the county's comprehensive plan policies, land development regulations, along with the Jungle Trail Management Plan, provide specific protections to maintain the historic and scenic character and integrity of the trail, and to restrict development impacts of the trail, especially when a development has primary access to a paved road such as A1A. And that's really the focus of all three of those different documents. And as such, the staff really had no other, could make no other conclusions with all those documents pointing in that direction. So again, staff would say that the Planning and Zoning Commission should find that the reviewing official did not fail with respect to criterion number 3. Staff's recommendation is that the P&Z find that the reviewing official did not fail to the review procedures criterion, did not fail the proper interpretation criterion, did not fail the proper application of the comprehensive plan and land development criterion, and that the Planning and Zoning Commission uphold the Community Development Director's decision to deny the subject application. Thank you.
Thank you for your presentation. I think the way we're going to do this is that I will ask the Commission if they have any questions of staff, and then I think I'll probably ask the applicant to come up and speak, and then we'll hear from everyone else. So let's start with, are there any questions of staff on the presentation and the matter that's before us right now? No? Okay.
No, I have a question.
Oh, sorry.
In your opinion, are there changes at the A1A entrance that need to be made for safety right now?
We haven't analyzed that in respect to a lot of the geometry and the use and what the applicant's intending it to be used for. And the Public Works Director is here and maybe could speak to that a little bit better. The design was done in 1999. I'm not sure of the change in some of the larger vehicle designs since then.
Question, are there any restrictions as far as the size or type of vehicles that are allowed on the trail, on Jungle Trail? I mean...
Chris Mora, Public Works Director. I don't believe there's any signed restrictions as far as, say, no trucks allowed or anything like that. There are speed restrictions that we've implemented over the years because of the narrowness of the road. In some areas it's only 13 feet wide, which is just basically a single lane road. As it winds south of 510 and along the east side of the river, it's very narrow in places, and you can't get two vehicles to pass simultaneously. In Florida, the legal width for a vehicle in the statutes is 102 inches. That's 8.5 feet. Many larger trucks and landscape trailers are exactly at 8.5 feet wide. If you add 2 feet on either side for clearance, that brings it up to 12.5 feet. So with a road that's only 13 feet wide and you have 12.5 feet for one vehicle in the clearance space, that doesn't leave any room for any passing vehicle.
Or pedestrian, or bicyclist, or hiker, or woman pushing a baby, or any of the other stuff that's regularly on the Jungle Trail.
And that's an excellent point, because there is a lot of pedestrian traffic, there's a lot of bicycle traffic, and they were the ones who were pushing for lower speeds at times that we get complaints from. So,
did staff analyze any other mitigation to address communities' concerns? Tree trimming, I know it was referenced in your report.
Well, again, tree trimming, some of the other items, and again, Public Works Director may be able to address this in a little bit more depth, is we haven't got a plan that shows the front as far as the geometry, turn lanes, radii, and things along those lines. Haven't seen a plan that shows how a large truck might sit in the entry. That's been described to us, but not any sort of engineered drawings that show the length of the vehicle, how the vehicle would be accommodated, and changes that could be made to accommodate a larger vehicle. We haven't seen that. That is some of the questions that staff has asked, but to...
It might be fair to say we're not really here to rule on the adequacy or inadequacy of their thing now. We're here to rule on the suitability of the use that's currently being objected to, or that they're asking for a variance for. I mean, that's really what we're here to make a decision about.
If I could, Mr. Chairman, I'd just add that staff is aware that there is right-of-way and common area where the roadways are now, where the curves are now. So we think that there is room on common property, so to speak, within the subdivision if they needed to widen something. Certainly trimming trees is something that has to happen, especially if larger vehicles go through there and probably have overgrown over time.
And let me just add to that, from an operational standpoint, if you have a vehicle stage that's providing a blind spot or a screening type of problem, well, then you can also begin to use a flag person. You can use other operational aspects to to mitigate those types of temporary conditions that are caused by a large vehicle maybe causing a blind spot.
Mr. McCoy, do you have a before we hear from the applicant or their attorney, do you have a copy that you can show us of the original site plan or the original order related to that site plan, so that we can see what, because my understanding from reading this was that there was a strict prohibition that entrance, as originally configured, would be for construction use only. Is that correct?
That's correct. I don't have that with me, but in looking at the original plans, it's labeled as a construction access.
And so let me ask you this. When something is a construction access and the development is built out, is there an assumption that the construction access will be permanently closed, or is there, in case there's ever a demolition or something like that and it's rebuilt, that it can be reopened, but it's only in the event of substantial construction activity? Is that the general understanding of it?
That's the general understanding, and that's not to say it couldn't have some ongoing renovations. When we get to points like that, we like to make sure that they're fairly well reviewed, and we understand that what the operation is going to be. If somebody's going to come in and do a large-scale renovation, need to bring in a crane, need to bring in other large equipment, we would typically allow that.
Right.
But again, we want to understand sort of that envelope, what's being requested and for how long. And
well, what typically happens to construction entrances at developments once they're developed? What typically? I mean, we just had one at this one we're looking at. Earlier, I think it was item number 4. There's a construction entrance. There's phasing. Sure. What typically happens to that?
I can answer that. There are a number of uses. One is it could be converted at some point in time to an emergency access where there's a emergency services has a code. It could also be converted, still mostly gated, but converted to pedestrian access, especially next to the trail. Lots of pedestrian access to the trails. It could become a pedestrian access as well. That's what we tend to see. But as John had mentioned, and you had a really good question, if there were to be, especially with the multifamily project, major renovations, they're changing out all the windows or balconies or something like that, that could be a very infrequent, every 10-year sort of occurrence, and that access could be opened back up and used if it were necessary for that.
But the idea is that it's a limitation on use.
Yes.
And, okay.
Yes. And let me explain just a little bit further and give you 2 examples. One is the one you brought up of Harmony Reserve. That'll be converted into essentially their main access point in Phase 4. So at the end of the day, it becomes a main access point. Mm-hmm. We have a subdivision going in on 5th Street Southwest where the applicant's saying, hey, we've got this really nice, beautiful brick paver entry we just put in. We're planning on building maybe 15 to 20 homes within the first year. We don't want all the concrete trucks running over that. Let us keep our construction access point for 15 months.
Right.
So we said, go through the process, get an administrative approval, link to a temporary use permit that sets out the conditions of how long and how that's going to be used, what it's going to be used for, and show us a landscape plan at the end of the day that gets converted and landscaped out at the end of this period. And that's what's going to occur potentially there.
Right.
A little bit different situation. This is the Jungle Trail.
This is the Jungle
Correct.
Trail. That's right.
Is the Jungle Trail entrance currently designated as an emergency entrance?
It is not. Their emergency entrance is on the south side of their project to the water plant road, and it's currently got a little fenced area, and it's fenced off. But
which would suggest to me that their original intent was to limit it even more to just a construction entrance. If they would have bothered to say, well. And furthermore, if there's ever going to be any further traffic once this construction's over with specialty type, which would be emergency, we're not even going to let that go through here. We're going to put it through over here. I mean,
right,
that's kind of, there's a little bit of speculation in there, but the fact that they put a separate entrance just for that use makes me think this was a very limited use and a very specified use on what that was to be for.
That's consistent with these Jungle Trail Management Plan. Let me just go back to the overhead for just a second. And the emergency access point is down in this area of the water plant road. And one of the nice points about having it to the water plant road is you still just end up with a single cut serving multiple users on Jungle Trail, so you don't have the multiple driveway with accessing back here. So from a scenic standpoint, it reduces or increases the scenic integrity by just having the single curb cut, and that's the point I wanted to make. Thank you.
I have a question for Bill. Are we limited in scope here to the three criteria that has been outlined in staff's report?
What other criteria would you want to use?
But these are
the factors. Yes,
the fundamental factors that we're basing our decision on.
Correct.
Okay. So a lot of other conversations somewhat irrelevant to the point.
That's why you're the decision maker as far as what you hear.
Any other questions of staff before we ask the applicant? Because that's the order I'd like to go in. None? Okay, is the applicant or their representative here this evening? Would you please state your name and address for the record? Thank you. Good evening.
Good evening. Greg Castellino, 3111 Cardinal Drive, Vero Beach. I'm the attorney for Somerset Bay Condominium Association. As a point of clarification with regards to the way the agenda is laid out, it references Bermuda Club Homeowners Association. I do not represent Bermuda Club Homeowners Association, so I want to make sure that the record's clear on that. I only represent the Condominium Association, and that's because when Bermuda Club was developed, the Somerset Bay parcel was not part of the initial development, and it came through county approval by way of an administrative approval that when this matter came first to me, I asked the same question, well, what exactly was agreed to in the first place? And if, John, can you help me get
Certainly.
the
It's
screen?
I just need to get you to the...
Thank you. All right. So I'm going to scroll ahead to two pictures. These are the only two documents in the entire county development file for Somerset Bay Condominium that touch on this back gate. There's that line that goes to a next sheet, and that's it. Designated construction entrance. Doesn't say designated initial construction. It doesn't say designated construction entrance only. There is no other restriction or prohibition that staff could show me in the entire development file on this issue. Now,
Are you arguing that designated construction entrance means something more than designated construction entrance? I'm a little confused.
No, what I'm arguing is as far as initial construction, and both the commission as well as staff hit on the point when it touched on reconstruction or substantial renovation. And I want to go back, I want to rewind everybody back to the original procedural starting point of this matter. The appellant is not an applicant out of thin air. This process started because Indian River County Code Enforcement cited the association for two things. One, there's a pothole that's actually in the 40-foot county maintenance right-of-way under the Jungle Trail Plan. And then the other item was the construction gate. And to quote the violation, it said, use of construction gate for residential access. The association wants this commission and staff to be super clear in knowing that in no way do they want everyday use, in no way do they want daily use, in no way do they want residential access, or to turn this into a back alley, or to make this a western egress point. The solution put forward by code enforcement was lock the gate permanently. And we went to Roland and staff and said first, well, show me exactly what was agreed to in the first place. You've just seen the entirety of it. And then we said, well, what can we do to fix this problem? And the answer was, well, you would need to do a minor site plan application. And so off we went. And what we actually specifically asked for, to quote, in order to avoid damage to the oak tree canopy and reduce an ongoing traffic hazard, to which I will offer testimony from two of the association board directors in just a moment. We request that the construction use restriction be changed to permit utility, sanitation, moving, and other such oversized vehicles to use that entrance as well. Ultimately, I think staff and the appellant are not that far apart. The fundamental issue being what I heard questions to staff hitting on, and that's what do we do about that front entrance? And even if you trim the oak canopy back, if you've got somebody who's bringing in an Atlas Van Lines van, what do you do then? By no means do we expect this to be, or we're ever asking or intending to imply that we are asking to make this into an everyday residential access point. Not the case.
What was utility, sanitation? You mean like trash trucks that come twice a week?
And let me touch on the.
I just want to understand exactly
Yes.
what it is you're asking for, so we understand exactly what the scope of broadening the definition might be and what that would equate to in everyday life. I think we deserve to know what that is.
Absolutely. And the issue that it boiled down to in my analysis of the comp plan and the jungle trail management plan and the existing circumstances were alternate access. If it's a vehicle, be it utility, sanitation, moving, et cetera, that can get in and out through A1A, you don't have an argument, I would tell my client. But if it's something that doesn't, as a practical matter, have any alternate access without creating either damage to the oak tree canopy, which is something that is consistent with the comp plan and the LDRs, or if it creates a traffic and safety hazard, then there truly isn't an alternate. So the answer to your question is any of the above if they can't get in and out safely through A1A.
So let's take these one by one, just so I understand what you're talking about. What's utility? Who are the utility users that you are proposing?
There's a trash truck trying to get through.
Can you answer my question? The utility. Right. When you wrote this letter, I presume, I just want to understand what you meant by. So you said to permit. You said we request the construction use restriction be changed to permit utility, sanitation, moving, and other such oversized vehicles. So what do you mean by utility vehicle? Give me an example of a utility vehicle.
Maybe a power truck that has an apple picker that needs to get in there for some reason.
Okay. And sanitation is the weekly trash truck.
Which I wanted to raise that issue with regards to, thank you for mentioning that, with regards to those types of vehicles. I believe that it actually is consistent with the transportation element, not only because of the side friction problem on A1A, but also it seems to me that a query to staff, these vehicles like the twice a week garbage truck are already on Jungle Trail. And my question that I never really got an answer from staff was, if they come out of, say, Earring Point and went right across and into Somerset Bay, would that increase, decrease, or keep the same the use and wear and tear on Jungle Trail? Again, not trying to create something new and, oh, by the way, we just moved in and we don't like the old rules and now we want to change them. That's not the case here. We got cited for a code violation. We're trying to find a way to solve it that's consistent with what staff said in their report at page 4 has been their custom and practice.
But I'm going to presume that staff answered somewhat like as follows, and you tell me what is irrational or incorrect about saying this. The Jungle Trail is, a nationally designated, all of those things. It's a jewel of Indian River County. It's beautiful. It's a big reason these people bought their condos there. It's something to be enjoyed, and it's a low use, low restriction, heavy restriction type road. I think I hope we can all stipulate that's the case. So I think the answer with Earring Point is there is no other access onto Earring Point, and to the extent we want to limit as much as possible, what goes on Jungle Trail, which by its many designations seems self-evident that that's what we would want to do, that if there's an opportunity anywhere else to limit what goes on Jungle Trail, we should avail ourselves of that opportunity. I mean, wouldn't that be a rational response to that, to your question, which is what's the difference if it just goes across the street? Well, the difference is you have another access, and we're not expanding any more use on a beautiful, nationally registered, historic, beautiful thing that we all enjoy here and a lot of pedestrians enjoy.
And I would say to you that if implementation of the line that's on that site plan, as interpreted by county staff, again, going back to this starting with a code enforcement violation and us just trying to rectify that problem, if its interpretation and implementation actually results in more wear and tear on the road, then no, that's a bad thing. And it segues nicely into the landscape buffer maintenance issue that staff and we are not far apart. We actually were denied on this in our application. This is another reason for the appeal. But in the staff report, they said to the contrary that they, quote, staff has allowed emergency access, something that we asked for in our application to have made codified permits, so they'd already allowed that. Interim and temporary access, construction, Jungle Trail buffer maintenance. Again, we don't want our I don't want my association to be put in a position of trying to figure out how to not violate the plan or the rest of the code requirements, where, for example, with landscape maintenance, you've got this gate and the guys can park inside the gate on Somerset property, but you certainly wouldn't want to, it strikes me, it would be nonsensical to say, no, you can't come through that gate. You're going to have to go all the way around and come down 510 to Jungle Trail to get to the outside of the fence line to do your landscape maintenance. That certainly wouldn't make sense, and that's not what staff said. Staff said in its report that they've permitted that. And that was something that was also part of our application and our request for a site plan approval. Again, remembering that we're here in a position where we're cited for a code violation and we've got ongoing maintenance obligations, and truly this board in good faith comes before this commission feeling like it's between a rock and a hard place. With that, I'd like to offer testimony.
Let me ask you a question first. I'm sorry, Dr. Day, you go ahead.
Before you do, I want to go back to a statement you made about the Atlas van line. Were you proposing that it may make more sense for the Atlas van line to enter through the construction gate than through the A1A gate?
Maybe. Maybe so. I can show you that it's a pretty open area. The development actually did not complete, and so the area you're seeing right there, if you were to look just off camera to the right, is empty, where two condo pods were supposed to go, the footprints were. They never actually got built. So potentially, yes. But to address that issue better than I certainly can, I would ask that Mr. Hackett testify to what his personal observations have been.
Before you do, the argument you were making about the Atlas van line was the canopy. If the canopy off of A1A can be trimmed and allow the Atlas van line in there, does it still make more sense for it to enter through Jungle Trail?
That raises the site friction, public safety issue, which Mr. Hackett was going to testify to.
Please state your name and address for the record.
Yes, sir. My name's Charlie Hackett. I live at 9037 Somerset Bay Lane. I would like to point out, if I may, I observed on several occasions a major moving van that cannot get through the canopies and requires to have the goods loaded or offloaded, the case may be, into a straight truck, or you want to call it a bob truck, that's smaller. I was pulling out, and I've seen this before, and there was a very large moving van. In order to accommodate being able to, his nose of the truck is across the bicycle path and out just a little bit into A1A. He has to do that because that truck is a maximum length for Florida, and then you have maybe a 50 or 60 foot bob truck, a straight truck, to get to the canopy. And then you have to leave room for people to get in there through the gate. They can't back the trucks right up to the gate. So by the time they do that, when you're pulling out, you have no vision to the north. If something's coming from Disney down there, what you do is you stick your fender out just a little bit, and then you ease out a little bit more, and then you pretty much figure, well, you pretty well got it blocked, and you can sort of sneak around the truck and get out of there. But I figure that one of these days, and we got to remember this, let me back up and say that some of our drivers aren't real young. I mean, I'm not being disparaging, please don't misunderstand me on that. But somebody's going to pull out there and get T-boned and possibly killed. And that's what bothers me about that. And it's I've observed this several times, whereas if they could get in the back way, they will not hinder egress and ingress into A1A. And that is, I don't think that's a matter of convenience, I think it's a matter of safety.
Mr. Hackett, if I could ask you a couple of questions.
Yes, sir.
Before you got cited, was this fence that's being shown up on the screen, was that there?
Yes, sir.
And
may I put that in perspective for you, sir?
Please do.
Yes. This view is taken from Jungle Trail.
Yes, sir.
That is the construction access gate. You're looking, here's Jungle Trail, and that's perpendicular to Jungle Trail, and it's looking into the condominiums that are built there. What I'm discussing, when I was talking about the moving van, is at the A1A exit at the other end of Jungle. Yes,
and I'll get there. I wanted to start with this first. Now, this gate was always locked?
Here?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
And so none of the residents could use it. You'd only need a key to use this.
It is locked. No residents use it. The only use there is somebody, and we don't let construction people in pickup trucks or panel trucks. It's strictly for an instance where there's not a practical way to get in the front gate because of the size of the vehicle. And it's not even a weekly basis. So maybe the trash trucks are. Your
basic landscape truck and trailer could make it through the oak trees in the front without skinning them up.
Oh, absolutely.
So they wouldn't need to use this gate.
No.
Yes, I've got one of you nodding and one of you shaking your head.
If I may, and Mrs. Baus is going to speak. Actually, that's what she was going to address. But the reason why they need access is not to drive in, but to use their landscaping mowers and such to deploy off property to the outside Jungle Trail side of the fence line.
Yeah.
Which is their obligation to maintain.
Understood.
That's
Mr. Hackett, what about weekly sanitation trucks, garbage trucks?
Sir?
What about the sanitation, the weekly sanitation?
Sanitation trucks have a problem with the canopy. And I think at the moment they're going through the back gate.
No, they're not.
They're not? Wrong. That's changed. I stand corrected.
I got a question for you about the moving vans, the long trucks.
Yes, sir.
Long trucks need very large turning radiuses in order to make a turn. Agreed?
Yes, sir.
So, are you certain that a large truck, you mentioned the largest one that would be allowable under Florida Department of Transportation regulations or U.S. Department of Transportation, are you sure that it's going to be able to make that angle off of Jungle Trail, which is very narrow, to an almost perfectly perpendicular road that enters, your property? And then furthermore, once it's in there, how's it going to get out if not going out through the A1A entrance and hitting the oak trees and everything else anyway?
You back out.
No way.
No way?
There's no way.
Yes, there is a way. I was in the trucking business for a number of years.
So you, first of all, as to my first question, you're saying these giant trucks you think can make that radius turn on Jungle Trail into into the construction entrance?
I would think so, because it's a big, wide gate. They can make it in.
We need to have only the person who's at the podium. But
yeah, it can make it in, and like I say, some of these big trucks, these guys can back a truck out of there. The issue is trying to unload while you're sticking out in the middle of A1A.
So the question then becomes, are we narrowing the scope down to moving trucks and landscaping trucks because the sanitation trucks are using the entrance? And
well, I would say that'd be the case unless there is some kind of a, like for instance, if there's some kind of a construction truck that comes in there that for some reason, a crane or something, that can't get in.
Understood.
That would be, but I think
that's currently allowed that's currently allowed.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
But what you don't do, it's not every day except for sanitation trucks, which I was mistaken, they do come in the front gate. And a lot of times it's not every week. But there are times when I think it's in the best interest of safety, particularly that you allow this just on a common sense basis.
Understood.
If we could take a look at an aerial, please. Aerial of the subdivision. I've got one in the backup as attachment 2. I don't know if you had one in there.
Go back to mine. Give me just one moment and I'll put one up.
Thank you. When was the last time there was any active construction in this area as far as building is concerned? The last condos and houses were completed when?
7. Yeah, 2007.
All right. There you go.
There are 2 more building lots in there, but it's probably a long shot that they will build.
Mangroves.
Well, there's 2 building pads that were cleared and ready to build, but for reasons other than developmental reasons, those 2 buildings have not been built. But
okay.
They are on the approved plans, and it is a cleared building site.
All right. If you take a look at the aerial, please, Mr. Hackett, when you come in, I know that I know that the oak trees overhang the road there. Now, if you'd walk us through on the aerial to the rest of the problems where canopies might interfere with like a garbage truck or a large moving truck. Because you showed us pictures that are up in the very front, and I'm familiar with that. I'm just trying to find out if there are other areas around, it looks to be Somerset.
Yeah. Are there other areas where there are canopy trees?
Where there would be regular problems with canopy trees getting back to your condominiums? From the main entrance.
Can I?
Go ahead.
State your name and address for the record, please.
My name is Maureen O'Malley Bawes. I am a resident of 9055 Somerset Bay Lane, Unit 401, and I am the president of the Somerset Bay Condominium Association. When you come off A1A into the community,
right,
this area here, as well as this area here, and the area to pretty much here, is a very narrow road. It's actually split so that it's a lane in each direction at one point. And so it's not a very wide road, but that is really where the canopy of the oaks is mostly a problem. Now, the canopy has been raised to 14 feet, which I know is the ruling that we are meant to be living by, and it has been done. In addition to that, as you come down Somerset Bay Lane, there are oaks along the way, and then when you get on to around the bend, there are live oaks along the right side of Somerset Bay Lane. Again, those canopies, to the extent that they overhang the Somerset Bay Lane, have been raised to 14 feet. So hopefully that answers your question.
Okay.
Okay.
Yes, thank you.
Okay. Can I say...
I've got one question. For the maximum height of vehicles, what is the height of a sanitation truck or a moving van?
Beats the heck out of me.
No, I'm not asking you. I'm
Thank
asking
you.
staff.
I'm going to defer to the Public Works Director as far as the size of vehicles on the vans and the garbage trucks.
You're going to know this right off the top of your head, aren't you?
It's 13 feet.
13.
Bam.
So if the entire canopy, what about moving trucks?
What about moving?
What's the height of moving trucks?
Well, in Florida, there's a legal height limit. I think it's 13 and a half feet. That's for all vehicles.
So if the
you get
canopy
up-
is at 14 feet, where's the problem?
Exactly.
Well, we have the president of the Bermuda Club Homeowners Association with us as well, and he was sworn in. Can he speak to that?
Yeah. Your name and address for
My
the
name
record,
is David
please.
Snyder. I'm the president of Bermuda Club Homeowners Association. I live at 9066 Castle Harbor Circle in Bermuda Club.
Good evening.
And Bermuda Club is responsible for all the maintenance of the front entrance all the way down from the very front from A1A all the way down to where the Somerset Bay condominiums are. We just spent $9,900 this year trimming oak trees, about half of which were spent in the beginning portion up here where you come in from A1A. That road twists and turns about 4 times to get in. Moving vans cannot get in. I know they can't. Moving vans have come in off of the jungle trail because I saw one 2.5 years ago when I was moving in here. They were able to get in and get out, to come up, go down Castle Harbor, and get out, but they cannot come in. It's a moot point whether they can get under the canopy because they can't do these twists and turns. I brought 6 pictures on my iPad, if any gentleman would like to see them, to show how many twists and turns there are. First to get in, and then after a stop sign, there's another island that has some twists and turns to get towards Somerset Bay condominiums. That make it, like I said, impossible for moving vans to come in. Last week we had 2 trucks come in to do palm trees, and both of them had you can call them cherry pickers on the back, that they got in, but it was very difficult. They just somebody had to walk them in. Now, we do, since we are 2 separate organizations, we have our own separate trucks that come in for recycling once a week. We have separate contracts for companies that come in twice a week to haul trash/garbage. And we have our own companies that do landscape, cutting grass, trimming, fertilizing, pest control. So there are a lot of these trucks, not just for one homeowners group, but for 2.
How do they get in?
How does what, sir?
How do they get in the back gate if it's locked? Who lets them in?
We have a full-time maintenance person on site from 7:30 in the morning till 3:30 in the afternoon.
Okay.
And what had been the case was that prior to the county citing us for violations of the gate use, our maintenance guy would get called by the sanitation truck guy and would get called by the recycle guy. He would go unlock the back gate, let them come through, and then lock it again.
Okay.
And so we would open it for those purposes. I personally, although I think that it makes sense to consider a change in the rules relative to the sanitation and the recycling trucks, I think more importantly, the issue is the moving trucks. There are 54 units that have been completed in Somerset Bay, and there are 93 homes that have been completed in Bermuda Club. There aren't a lot of people moving on a regular basis. It happens infrequently. And there is enough room to make that turn off of the Jungle Trail because of the width of the Somerset Bay when you come into of Somerset Bay Lane as it gets to the Jungle Trail. There is actually enough room. I have seen moving trucks do that myself. But the landscaping is an issue. Part of the agreement that Somerset Bay Condominium Association has is with St. John's Water Management. As a result of that agreement, we are responsible for some mitigation area maintenance on both sides of the Jungle Trail, actually. Could we have that?
Certainly.
Over that thingamajiggy? Oh, there it is, sorry. Oh. There it goes. We are responsible for the maintenance of all of the grass and bushes, as well as the, and somebody said it before, the mangroves along the lagoon side of the Jungle Trail. We're also responsible for this area here, which goes down all the way down. We have a dock and a gazebo. And in order for our landscape people to get to that area, what they're having to do now is they're actually having to use the Jungle Trail, which is to come in the entrance off of 510 in order to be able to come, and then to have to park. And someone, I think it was that gentleman, had mentioned that the equipment that is brought in by landscapers is on trailers that is almost as wide as the Jungle Trail as it is itself. So they're having to bring in the equipment on those trailers and then park that equipment someplace there to be able to offload their lawnmowers and so on to do the work that needs to be done. Whereas in the past, they would park and leave the vehicles inside on our property. And
Why
then
wouldn't
be
they come
able
off
to.
of A1A?
Pardon?
Why wouldn't they come off of A1A?
They do.
Well, they do, but that's not the point. They have to do the work on the other side of the fence.
What they're saying now is, since this violation, they've stopped letting people go through the back gate, period. So they, instead of parking the landscape.
What other, presumably not all of the developments that are on the Jungle Trail continue to have a construction entrance on the Jungle Trail, and presumably they are also responsible for maintaining the right-of-way, between the Jungle Trail and wherever their beginning of their improvements are. How do they handle this problem?
Well, yeah, it's a good question. Again, it's not an issue.
Do you meaning they come in through A1A?
Maintenance, like showing there the picture of the mower at the gate to get out on the Jungle Trail, certainly they can use the access gate to maintain their Jungle Trail buffer. They're going to be out on Jungle Trail anyway. They may as well be able to get it, shorter trip, not go all the way around. That's not an issue. And we've said that in our item. And so that's.
So are you just saying that it's just an undue burden to have those people come in off of A1A and park and then go?
No, not at all.
I'm just trying to understand.
Okay.
You said they're currently coming down the Jungle Trail.
Right,
and they're parking inside the entrance. Why wouldn't they just come down A1A?
No. They are not coming down Jungle Trail and parking inside the entrance. Since we were told that we needed to have that gate closed permanently all of the time, except for construction purposes, since we were cited, we have not opened that gate for any purpose, so that they have been using the Jungle Trail to be able to do the work on the Jungle Trail. And what we're really looking for, Mr. Zimmerman, is we're really looking for clarification. As the president of the condo association, let me tell you, it came as a really big shock to us when we got these 2 violations or cited for these violations from the county. Not something that we wanted to be
Sure, of course
doing.
not. Of course
And
not.
so when we actually went to our attorney and said, can you explain to us exactly what we can do and what we can use it for, the solution that we were given was, if you really want to avoid having any future citations, you should shut it down until we have further clarification. But in addition to that, we should come before you or go to the powers that be to say, can you please define for us exactly what we can use that gate for without violating. So that's really why I'm here. And as far as construction goes, the 2 lots are there. They're owned by the developer who developed Somerset Bay. He intends, I know, at some point to build those buildings. I cannot tell you how long it will be before he does that. In the meantime, I'm not sure how many of you are aware, but Somerset Bay was involved in a fairly large lawsuit against the developer for defective construction, and we have had to do significant repairs to our buildings. We have done all of the projects save one. We did use that gate for those repair projects, and we have one that will potentially start in January that will go for probably 9 months, which we would also like permission to use that gate for, because it's going to involve lifts and it's going to involve construction vehicles.
So, question for staff. So, prior to the citation, were there any issues related to the landscaping use?
No, not that I'm aware of. And if I can try to bring this to some point, let me try to be as clear as possible then to cut through some of this. Construction access certainly is allowed. Going back to the original plan or site plan, that's not actually what to look for in this. It's to look for exactly what we cited in the agenda item, which is the Jungle Trail Management Plan, which was 10 years in effect when this project was approved in 1999. That plan, and this is in your packet, says none of the developments bordering the trail will use the roadway for access when alternate roadway access is available. I think a strict reading of that out of the management plan says you don't even get construction access. However, we did, and that's the controlling document right there. And that's why it shows construction access on the site plan, because that was an exception that was agreed to, that was allowed. Okay. And as far as staff's position is, construction is not complete on the project. There are 2 buildable pods, so to speak. So it makes sense to keep the construction access there or to convert it. And again, we're fine if the applicant has some mowers or other things that they need to access the trail anyway to maintain the buffer. And she's exactly right. They have wetland areas to maintain. I mean, they do have a lot of maintenance responsibilities along the trail and on the west side of the trail. It only makes sense for them to use that for access for those maintenance types of purposes. But for sanitation trucks that come a couple of times a week, or you've got different contractors doing it, no. That should come in off their entrance on A1A. Moving vans, I can't imagine why you would want to bring a super large vehicle down a 1-lane road where there are pedestrians. That should come off of A1A. Or moving vans that are smaller than that service the people that are living there. Or you add some lanes or something like that near the entrance in a common area if you're going to have large vehicles and vans come in and out. To me, it's not actually appropriate to use the trail for some of these large vehicles that are going to be coming and going, multiple times a month, perhaps. Again, because it's, as the Public Works Director said, it's basically 1 lane wide. What do you do when there are pedestrian conflicts and you've got a giant moving van going down Jungle Trail? And the other point that I just wanted to make was, again, this is not the only project that has construction access to Jungle Trail and had it approved. And so if we allow moving vans to service this development, sanitation trucks to service this development, however multiple contractors there are. So that's why we denied the application. But again, to be clear, construction access, fine. If they were to have a major renovation that they had to do of multiple units, that's construction activity that occurs just every few years. We could approve that case-by-case basis. Maintenance access to the trail or to the wetlands, sure, that's allowed. But the other kind of, every week, every day type of uses, no, that's
So I
staff
have a
would not
question then. What
agree
if
with
it
that.
relates to a moving truck, and they just can't do it? Not allowed?
Well, I mean, there's a couple ways to do. Again, I think there's probably been cases where they've already had to offload.
Can I answer that question a little bit?
They have to offload.
This is a personal experience response, okay? I own an apartment community on A1A, and it's a gated community, and the big trucks can't get in there. And they do exactly what they say. Is it an ideal solution? No. But it's not that unique of a situation either. It happens all the time because it's an apartment community, people are moving in and out all the time. Read me again the restriction, the exact language in the management plan, and then
this is an attachment.
The management plan, which is the governing document over the restriction of use on the jungle trail, says...
That's correct. And this is your attachment 5, and it's page 8 from the management plan. It says, none of the developments bordering the trail, however, will use the roadway for access when alternate roadway access is available.
And let me jump in there. Let me jump in there. And let me say this. There's a reason that language was written the way it is. And here's the reason. The jungle trail is really, really, really special. If you've ever walked on it or biked on it, there's a park, there's a reserved, original, homesteaded pioneer family thing that the county bought recently. I mean, in my opinion, one of the best things Indian River County ever did was place as much protection as they possibly could on the jungle trail. And it ends in the first national wildlife refuge this country has ever had, is its terminus. I mean, it is a really special, really beautiful thing. If you haven't been on it recently, go this weekend. It'll blow your mind. It's that good. And so, I got to tell you, in my opinion, I'm not particularly inclined to expand the use for any reason that isn't absolutely, totally necessary and totally compelling. There are some things that are so special and so sacrosanct. And I mean, I've been on this committee a long, long time, and you probably never heard me say words like this because I'm kind of a small government guy. But this is a really special thing that Indian River County has. I love it. I've run on that thing 100 times. I've biked on that thing 100 times. I used to push my kids in their strollers on that thing. I used to live in the shores at the very terminus of it. So it was my neighborhood too. The southern end of it is really special. The northern end of it is even more special. The only thing that makes the southern end a little less special is it's a little more developed. It unfortunately got its protections a little later than the northern end. But it's still unbelievable. And the county has added to the historical significance of it recently with the Pioneer family property, which has an amazing history to it. And there's a beautiful, beautiful park with an old house on it that goes between A1A and the Jungle Trail that, if you've never visited, is really stunning. It's complete original habitat. And I got to say, in my reasoned opinion and in my experience, there is no place on the Jungle Trail for any kind of vehicles of this size and of this nature unless there's just no other alternative. And I think that's exactly what the jungle management plan says, and I think for good reason. I hope I've convinced you because I really feel strongly about it. It's special. I believe that the county did not fail in its criterions 1, 2, or 3, and I believe the development director was correct in his ruling for the exact reasons I've just stated. That's my opinion.
Stan, what specifically triggered the citation?
I'm not directly aware of how code enforcement became aware of it. A lot of times those come as essentially anonymous complaints, and I think that was the case. And investigation proved out. And it wasn't like anybody was trying to hide anything, I think, either. I don't read intentionality or anything like that into this particular case.
May I make concluding remarks as the appellant?
Please do.
Before we turn to...
There might be other people that wish to be heard on the matter.
Yeah, well, if you want to make concluding remarks, I will certainly reserve that time for you. Let's see if there's anybody else. Is there anyone else in the audience? Yes, sir. Please come up and, yeah, I think we... Yes, sir.
I mentioned earlier, I have 6 photographs I took today walking through the entranceway.
If you would like to show them, we certainly have the time to see them.
Absolutely.
I mean, yeah.
Right now?
Yeah.
I mean, if you would like to show them to us, we have the technology to make that happen.
Oh, okay.
I think I have a pretty good idea exactly what it's going to look like. I'm sure it's lovely. Oak canopies and hammocks in Indian River County on the Barrier Island are special.
With lots of S-turns.
Yeah.
Well, while he's firing that up, I don't know if you want to hear from anybody else that might want to speak.
I'll tell you what, let's let him finish that up. Then let's see if there's any more speakers, and then let's get the concluding remarks, if that's all right. Because it looks like he's got this. Look at that. Windows 8. Look at it.
I've been there. Multiple times. It's tight.
Yeah, it's tight. Of course it is. But so's the shores. They're all like
a slippery slope.
Yeah, they're all like that. What's that tennis community just south of there, where a lot of our friends live? Like the Burgoons was there.
Thank you.
Indian Trails. Yeah.
This is on the
Same
gate
thing. Indian
heading
Trails. Yeah.
out from Bermuda Club in Somerset with A1A in the background there.
Yep. Yep. Yep.
This is heading into...
Heading west, off of A1A.
Yes.
Yep.
Off of A1A.
Right.
And as you can see, it doesn't go very far, and it makes a hard left.
Yep, we saw that in the aerial. Yep.
And then, from a hard left, then it makes a really hard right.
Yep.
And I don't have another picture, but it then makes another hard left. And that's why I said before, moving vans can absolutely not get in here.
Yep, I understand. I believe you.
And we then go 100 yards, and we come to another island that has more escrow.
It's a little boulevarded there, yep.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for showing that to us. Okay, anyone else would like to speak on this before we allow the applicant? Yes, ma'am. Would you please state your name and address for the record?
Good evening. My name is Ruth Stambridge. I live at 4835 66th Avenue, and about 30-something years ago, I sat on the planning and zoning and the old building.
Welcome back.
So I appreciate all you do. I mean, it's probably a labor of love, I'm sure. I am the county historian. I'm also on the board of directors of the Indian River County Historical Society, and I read with interest this request to change a construction entrance to a service entrance in order to accommodate utilities, sanitation, moving, and other oversized vehicles. The original developer was well aware of Jungle Trail Management Plan when this PD was approved, and I believe they said it was 1999, and he undoubtedly agreed to it. And we all know that sometimes when a developer hands over a development to a homeowners association, things get lost in the transfer. And I believe this may be one of the things. The construction entrance that exists on Jungle Trail is just that, a construction entrance, and you saw that. It was never intended to be anything else. The developments were to provide paved alternate roadway access to A1A. We did all that part of the management plan as recommended in the guidelines, and we believe that these two homeowners associations do have, and we've seen it, a paved alternate roadway as part of their approved PD. And so for the last 10, 20 years, they've used that undoubtedly for the moving vans and things like that, unless, as these folks have said, they're going into the back door. The Indian River County Historical Society and a great number of citizens fought long and hard to protect and preserve the historical and scenic road. And over the years, the integrity of the trail has been compromised many, many times. So to stop this abuse and to save the trail, and I have one of the original Save Jungle Trail signs. We had those all over the county, and we can do it again.
What year was that, Miss Stanbridge?
Oh, that had to be about 85 or 6.
That'd be about
John Dean, who just passed away, paid for all of these, and we went back to John several times to get the funding to buy our bumper stickers. But, let's see, where am I? Over the years, the integrity has been compromised, but with the input of the Historical Society, the public, developers, residents, many meetings and hearings were held and the guidelines established to provide a framework to save the trail and to restore its integrity. And we were very surprised to read this association thinking about using that trail as maybe their back alley. Most of the associations along the trail, and there's a number of developments, are very pleased to have this historical bit of old Florida in their backyard. In fact, that's one of the ways we save the trail, by explaining to the developers, the ones that would listen, that this was an amenity that their homeowners association would be able to use for years and years to come, and it wouldn't cost them anything. And they agreed. So in the 30-plus years that the Jungle Trail was saved, the protection of the trail has been through the management plan, which is the guiding document, and through other methods that we have undertaken. In 1995, during Florida's sesquicentennial celebration, when we were 150 years old as a state, it was named the Florida Trails Greenway. And this is the poster from that day. We still give those out. People love those posters. In August of 2003, the trail received its highest award, and the entire 7.5 miles of Jungle Trail was listed on the National Register of Historic Places. In the United States, there are very few roads that have achieved that honor. We're talking parts of the Chisholm Trail, parts of the Natchez Trace, even parts of Route 66. So we're right up there at the top. And that year was also significant because on the north end of the trail, Pelican Island celebrated its centennial. So not only do we connect at the bottom, we connect at the top. And in between, we have all the things that this county road had been in 1920 when it was made with shovels and mules and by hand. The Indian River County Historical Society would like to urge this board to support the decision made by the planning director on Jungle Trail. This road will be here for our children and our grandchildren. I have one other thing for you guys. You should never have a historian talk. That road on front of this brochure that we have given out thousands of is Jungle Trail in its heyday. We may never get it back to where it was then, but we can at least save the trail. If you have any questions, I'll be glad to help you.
I do not. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, we're going to make closing arguments?
Can I just say one thing?
Yes, ma'am.
I want to assure everyone in this room that the Somerset Bay Condominium Association very much appreciates the Jungle Trail. We spend about $30,000 a year to maintain both sides of that Jungle Trail so that it looks the way it does. I would almost bet you that we are one of very few associations that have the size of responsibility for pieces of land on the Jungle Trail, because we do have a good distance between the lagoon and where our condominiums start. So just on the west side of our fence, we still have 2 mitigation areas inside of our fence. But just on the west side of the fence, which are on either side of the jungle trail, we spend $30,000 a year to help maintain it. So I assure you, we are not looking in any way, shape, or form to do anything detrimental to the jungle trail.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I think everybody can agree that this issue can be crystallized to the one sentence in the Jungle Trail Management Plan that said no access when alternate roadway access is available. I put the emphasis on the word alternate. I think it's important that this commission remember the procedural posture in which you find this matter. As Mr. DeBrawl told you, your review is de novo, right? So you get starting with a fresh look starting tonight. There was uncontroverted testimony, and the only actual factual finding testimony, as opposed to opinion, historical, etc., the only actual testimony that was unrefuted pointed out situations where there was no alternate access. For purposes of trying to come to, as my client put it, some common understanding.
Can you specify, remind me, what was the example where there is not an alternative access? Is it the moving truck?
Yes,
But he said himself that another truck comes up and they switch it from one to the other and then they bring it on in. Is that not alternate access?
I was talking about the testimony from the gentleman from Bermuda Club who testified, his testimony was unrefuted, that he has personally seen numerous occasions where vehicles can't make it through the twists and turns. I want to concede the issue of, or the request for utility sanitation vehicles. I think that the way this is developed this evening, and based on what we've heard from staff and even from my own client, I can't stand here in good faith tell you that there is no alternate access. And so we would certainly be happy to concede that. What we would ask ultimately, though, for, as Mr. DeBrawl also told you, you can affirm in part, or affirm in part and deny in part. We would have had a lot shorter hearing if I had, at the Community Development Director denial letter stage, gotten that same language that was in the staff report with regards to the landscape buffer maintenance, with regards to construction not being as some contend for initial construction, but ongoing construction, not just the 2 pods, but major renovation projects such as the association has coming up and has just undergone. And I think they use the expression intermittent, interim and temporary access for emergency purposes. That was something that we requested in our original application, to have that, if you will, codified, so that we can remove ourselves from the rock and the hard place that we find ourselves in, again, considering that this was brought to us as a code enforcement violation. So it strikes me that the part that should be reversed is the patent or flat denial, to the extent that the staff's report lists items that they do permit. So that should be reversed so that it's made a part of the record for this appellant / code violation respondent, because I still got to go back to deal with that code violation, which has been held in abeyance pending this process. And then certainly, like I said, we would concede with regards to any vehicle that has no alternate access, or that has alternate access. They should not be allowed to use that gate. We're not asking them to, nor did we ever actually ask them to, nor do we want everyday, daily use. What we would ask, though, is that they be permitted, if it can be shown that that vehicle, and it could be a moving van. That was the one example everybody came to tonight, but I can't say sitting here for certain that there isn't some other type of vehicle or circumstance that couldn't be, quote unquote, without an alternate roadway access. And that's really all we're looking for. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, I'll repeat what my opinion is. My opinion is that the county did not fail criterion 1, 2, or 3, and the development director was correct in his ruling.
And I agree with the chair on that. So where are we?
I just have a question for staff. So this is part of the record, your report, in terms of his suggestion on how they respond to that citation. Is that correct? Because it seems like we got a lot of common ground here.
Maybe, maybe not. I think I did hear conceding on the utility and sanitation trucks, which is good. Again, I would not say that any and every type of vehicle should be able to access this project through Jungle Trail, and to leave it up to, oh well, there's a vehicle that can't make the gate.
I'm not saying that. I'm talking about the landscaping as well. We've got their past practices. Where do we stand with that?
Okay, I'll just repeat, and it's fine to summarize. I'm not agreeing with the conclusion of if a vehicle can't get in our front gate, it can come in Jungle Trail, because that leaves it up to that's open-ended, any type of vehicle, and maybe not every type of vehicle is appropriate. Yeah. But again, we would allow construction, either construction of the new units or a major renovation. They can contact us. We can verify it by email or by letter. Access they need to get to the trail, their frontage of the trail, and to maintain the west side of the trail, we have no issue. We have no issue with that either. And they do have an emergency access already off of the water treatment plant. If they want to work something out with emergency services as well for this entrance, we would have no problem with that.
That's what I was looking for, Stan.
That's exactly where staff is on this. And I don't think you need to reverse the decision for that.
Understood. That's what I was looking for. Thank you for the summary.
And I would say this also. I honestly think for the benefit of the Jungle Trail, but also, frankly, for the benefit of the county and the homeowners, we shouldn't leave much of a gray area. It's not fair to them for there to be a gray area or anybody. It should be pretty clear. I think we should be as clear as we possibly can in our...
I concur with Mr. Zimmerman and Mr. Day.
Are we ready for a motion?
I'll call for a motion.
I agree with everything you've said, and I move that we approve staff's recommendations without change.
I'll second.
I'm going to open up to discussion. I would recommend, with the county attorney's permission and approval, that your I don't even know if I can do this as the chair, so I guess that's what I'm asking, that his motion be amended to be clarified to say that the county did not file criterion 1, 2, or 3, and the development director was correct in his ruling. Is that a more clear...
I think the motion is to uphold the decision of the community.
Which is sufficient.
That's correct.
Which is sufficient. Okay. Just wanted to clarify that point. Any further discussion? All in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? There are none.
Excuse me, who seconded the motion?
Mr. Emmons did.
Hold on. Item number 6, Commissioners' Matters. It's late. Can you give us just a very quick update on the Full Gospel Assembly and how that's going? I'm curious about that.
Sure. There was a meeting with staff, representatives of the church, and the two property owners that spoke. I think there was an agreement that there was some progress made in terms of buffering and the sound issue, but the neighbors still think that ultimately there's not enough room on the site, even though there will be excess spaces above and beyond what they use now, and so everybody agreed to disagree, and so now we'll be moving forward to a hearing, if not December, probably January. There's one more kind of engineering detail to work out on the off-street
Please
part.
make that in January.
Every day it's getting closer to January. So. And the only other, the only other matter that I had is that we will be having a meeting in December. The second Thursday. So we will be having that meeting. That's all that I had, Mr. Chairman.
Item number 7 is planning matters. Are there any?
The only thing, just an update, you all did vote on the medical marijuana treatment center regulations. That went to the first hearing before the board. Amendment 2 didn't pass the 60%, but our board will hold their November 18th hearing, and at our recommendation, I would assume deny it. But we do have it on file if we need to bring it
We need to
up.
resurrect that at
That's
some
correct.
point in the future.
That's
Good.
correct.
And attorneys matters, sir.
The only attorney's matters that I would have is that if anybody wants to continue their service on the board or cease their service on the board, there's an opportunity to do that now toward the end of the year. If you'd like to do so, please notify your appointing commissioner or the clerk.
Thank you. We're adjourned.
Have a good evening.